Prior to the King's coronation, a number of anti-monarch protesters, including the head of the group Republic, Graham Smith, were arrested and held without charge. The police have been accused of denying citizens' rights to peacefully protest, while the police have defended themselves, stating that they had to make tough choices when balancing the rights of people's freedom of expression against the likely disruption to the coronation. And this incident comes on the back of new legislation aimed at curbing disruptive protests by the likes of Animal Rising and Just Stop Oil, effectively allowing the police to stop and search any person without any reason. So was this the police unlawfully denying citizens' rights to protest, or were the police acting within the law? Against the backdrop of the arrest of protesters at the King's coronation, we're going to look at the law regarding arresting someone without a warrant, how long someone can be kept in custody without charge, and then we're going to look at the balance that needs to be struck between the rights of individuals' freedom of expression and the rights of the police to take action to prevent disruptive protest. We're then going to conclude by looking at the new Public Order Act 2023, which was brought in to curb disruptive protests, and it effectively allows the police to now stop and search any person for any reason without justification. Starting off with freedom of speech or freedom of expression, this is a legal right in England and Wales through the Human Rights Act of 1998, which implemented the European Convention on Human Rights into domestic law. Article 10, freedom of expression, and Article 11, freedom of assembly, relates to the right to peaceful protest. Now, this is not an absolute right, such as the prohibition on torture, but this is a qualified right, which means that the right to freedom of expression and freedom of assembly can be limited for specific domestic reasons. And this is normally things such as national security, or in this case, for protests, the prevention of crime or disorder. So the question then becomes is an anti-monarch protester holding a placard or chanting "Not my king" something that should be limited to prevent crime and disorder? Let's take a look at it from the police's perspective. In England and Wales, the police have the power to arrest someone without a warrant under Section 24 of the Police and Criminal Evidence Act of 1984. This essentially sets out criteria that must be met in order for the police to exercise their power. And this is a two-part test. The first part is that they have reasonable grounds for suspecting that an individual has committed an offence, is committing an offence, or is about to commit an offence. If that first part is met, then they must consider the arrest necessary to achieve a legitimate aim. Now that includes obtaining the individual's name and address, preventing physical injury or damage to property, to protect a child or vulnerable person, to allow a prompt and effective investigation of the offence or conduct in question, or to prevent the individual from disappearing. In the case of the protesters arrested at the King's coronation, the police would have argued that they would have suspected that the individuals were about to commit an offence, something like a breach of the peace or another public order offence, and that the arrest was necessary to achieve a legitimate aim, namely the prompt and effective investigation of the offence. Now, I'm not saying that the police were right to do that, or even that they were acting within the law. I'm saying that this is what the police would argue that they were doing when they were exercising their powers to arrest someone without a warrant. Once the protesters were transferred to the police station, their detention would have needed to be authorised by a custody officer, normally at the rank of sergeant. Now, the custody officer must have had reasonable grounds for believing that the individual's detention was necessary for either securing and preserving evidence or to obtain further evidence through questioning. Once authorised, an individual can be detained for up to 24 hours. At the 24-hour point, the individuals must either be released, charged, or the police can go to the court to apply for further time to question them. In this case, a total of 57 individuals were released, either on bail, or 2 individuals were released without charge. So where does the balance lie between individuals' rights to freedom of expression and the police's rights to arrest people without a warrant? You may think that the powers the police have to arrest someone without a warrant are quite wide-ranging and open to interpretation. And a cynic might say that the police have used those powers to remove individuals who they would have considered to be most disruptive during the King's coronation. The police, meanwhile, would likely say that they've used their legitimate powers for proper means to prevent disorder and prevent crime. Now, there's always going to be a balance that needs to be struck between allowing individuals to exercise their right of protest and allowing the police to prevent protests which get violent or cause major disruption. And there's always going to be an argument as to where the balance tips from one side to the other. Have the police got it right on this occasion? I'm not so sure. The individual who was arrested, the head of Republic, Graham Smith, as I understand it, has engaged with the police multiple times over the protests that were going to take place. And arguably the police have made the issue of protesting against the monarch a bigger issue than it needed to be by making these arrests. Moving away from the coronation and the arrest of protesters, something I think which is more concerning is the erosion of the protection from being stopped and searched for any reason and without any justification under the guise of preventing disruptive protests, and this is something that I will look at next. The Public Order Act of 2023 has recently been enacted, and it's legislation aimed at curbing disruptive protests, the likes of which we've seen from organisations such as Just Stop Oil and Animal Rising. And it creates specific criminal offences relating to the disruption to key national infrastructure and preventing people from gluing themselves to roads. Within the legislation, there is a section regarding stop and search, and under section 11.7, it gives constables the power to stop and search any person or vehicle without any reason and without suspecting them of committing an offence or carrying a prohibited item. Now, this is a change from the previous legislation where a constable required reasonable grounds for suspecting an individual was carrying something like illegal drugs, a weapon, or something that could be used in the commission of a crime. Now, this reasonable grounds requirement was always quite open to interpretation, but this new legislation removes that completely. And it's quite concerning that this power has now been conferred upon police, that any individual, regardless of them going around their normal daily business, can be stopped and searched for any reason. And in a democratic society, that should not be the default position. So whilst this new legislation is aimed at curbing disruptive protests, the power to stop and search without any reason means that if I display a sticker in the back of my car relating to a certain organisation, I am at risk of being stopped and searched, despite the fact that I've done nothing wrong and have no active involvement in any of these organisations, and I don't think that's a position that we should be in. So to summarise, the protesters who were arrested at the King's coronation will argue that their right to peaceful protest has been denied, and that the general right to protest itself is being eroded by the overzealous nature of the police. The police, on the other hand, will continue to argue that they have acted legitimately to prevent disruption and crimes from being committed. It's always a difficult balancing act between an individual's right to freedom of expression and the right of the police to prevent disorder and crimes occurring. Have they got it right on this occasion? I'm not entirely convinced. With regards to the new Public Order Act of 2023, I think the right of a constable to stop and search any person for any reason without any justification or without suspecting them of committing an offence or carrying a prohibited item is a misstep, and I would argue that that is an overreach on the part of the police. But what do you think? This is just my opinion, so if you do have any comments, please post them down below. Thanks for watching. I hope you found this video informative. Remember, this is just my opinion and you are entitled to disagree. If you do wish to make a comment, please post it down below. If you did enjoy this video, please consider giving it a like. And if you'd like to see more from me, please do subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching. Take care.